All right, this is Justin Roner coming at you for another Agriscaping Podcast, and I'm here with a special guest. I don't normally have attorneys on the show with me, but today I've got David Griffith from Southern Arizona. Say hello, David.
Hello, good to be with you.
Now, David, I didn't bring you on to get any legal advice, and we brought you on for something else. We brought you on for citrus. And before we get into that, I guess I want to talk about just a little bit of kind of what got you into citrus and stuff. I mean, with being a professional in a different industry, but what's really driving your interest to grow stuff at home and getting into this the way you have?
Well, growing up in Arizona, I've always had a love for citrus. I grew up in an area that's basically Zone 9 or Zone 10, and we had citrus around, and I love citrus. And as an attorney, sometimes the practice of law can be pretty stressful, so one of my hobbies is gardening, and I like to grow a lot of trees. And right now I'm living in Zone 8, and I'm growing citrus trees, which can be quite a challenge if you don't do a lot of research and try to figure things out.
So when you say it's a little more difficult in that Zone 8, what makes it difficult where you're at?
Well, where I'm at, I am in southeastern Arizona, and it gets pretty cold. A typical low for the year is in the teens, and most of your citrus, you plant them in the spring and they die in the winter here. If you don't really coddle them and cover them up, they're going to die. And even if you do coddle them and cover them up, they might die anyway. So there's a lot of factors to consider and different varieties to consider, and you can be successful if you do it the right way.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up too, because citrus doesn't like cold very much, does it?
No, yeah, and here when it gets down to below 20 degrees every year, it'll kill most any citrus that's not protected.
Yeah, because we've got people that are listening in there from Florida to Alaska, from Maine to California. We got pretty much all over the place there, and we do have a lot of northern state people, even in zones 4 and 5, that are growing citrus indoors. But maybe you can talk a little bit about your favorite varieties that can handle a little bit of chill. I mean, which ones are most resilient and which ones are just like absolutely not resilient from your experience?
Well, from my experience and talking to people around town that have planted different things and had different things die, lemons and limes, they're generally not going to do well at all. The exception is the Meyer lemon. That has a little bit of a chance. It's a little bit more cold hardy than the other lemons and limes. My favorite thing to plant are the mandarins, and that's also what's most popular around the world now. The seedless mandarins, people are really enjoying those, but there's some mandarins that are very cold hardy compared to the rest of the citrus. I really like Satsumas, and I also have a Changsha mandarin that's growing quite well. There's also the gold nugget mandarin that's becoming popular now, and it's very cold hardy. The problem with that tree is that the fruit don't ripen until the springtime in March and April, and that's another issue. Even if you can get the tree to survive in Zone 8, it's going to ruin the fruit if it doesn't ripen before a hard freeze.
Yep, that's an important piece of the puzzle. It's like, and then so the varieties again, the Satsuma, and then Mandarin, and then what was the other one, the second one that you talked about?
The gold nugget mandarin and the Changsha mandarin.
Changsha.
The Changsha mandarin, right? Yeah, the Changsha mandarin has actually been used as a rootstock, but it has good tasting fruit. One of the issues with it is that it is very seedy, and so it's kind of more of a juicing fruit. But it's quite popular amongst the Zone 8 crowd in southern in the southern United States. There's a lot of people growing that. Satsumas, there's a lot of different Satsuma varieties. There's things like Brown Select Satsuma, Owari Satsuma, and generally those all do pretty well in the cold.
And those ones
and
really,
they also ripen.
I was going to say, those are really easy to
in,
peel, right?
Yeah, they're really easy to peel. They're the seedless. So generally speaking, the Satsumas are what you're going to enjoy the most if you can grow them, because they're pretty much seedless, easy to peel, and they ripen in the beginning of the winter, usually in November, where you might be able to pick them before they freeze.
Now, do you happen to know how that one compares with clementine? Is that in the same family of Satsumas, or is that a different one?
How they're related exactly way back when, I'm not sure, but no, they're not the same. The clementine's not nearly as cold hardy, but the Satsumas is kind of a family of its own within the Mandarin family that came out of Japan and China. They grow a lot of Satsumas in Japan, but it's a really good fruit, and it's really quite cold hardy. It can dip down into the high teens, and if it's a mature tree, 18 or 19 is not going to really affect it, whereas other trees would kill them outright. The orange trees or lemon trees.
Wow, and I know these ones have a little bit smaller leaf than like a big lime tree or a lemon tree, right?
Generally, yeah, but different Satsuma varieties have different leaves. Some of them have some quite, well, not really large, but they look pretty nice.
And so, with what you've got on your property, what are you growing right now?
Right now, I have 3 separate Satsuma varieties, and I also have a couple of Changsha Mandarins. I have the Gold Nugget Mandarin. I have an I-Ching lemon. That's another type of. It's kind of a lemon, but not exactly a lemon. It's kind of between a lemon and a grapefruit. But it hasn't fruited. It's just a small seedling, but it doesn't seem to be quite as cold tolerant as the Satsumas or the Mandarins.
And on the lemon, you also said the Mayer Improved Lemon. That's a pretty good one, and it's a little more cold hardy than the other lemon varieties.
Right, it's more cold hardy than most lemons and oranges, but it's not quite as cold hardy as the Satsumas or the Changsha Mandarin or the Gold Nugget Mandarin.
So on those different trees, I mean, these are different varieties that I don't really see. I certainly don't find them in my local nurseries and stuff. Where are you finding these kind of things?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges is finding them. Changsha Mandarin, you can actually order the seeds out of California, and you basically have to plant a seedling. Now, the issue with the seedling is it's going to take several years before it fruits, and generally the Changsha Mandarin it'll take 5 or 6 years before it fruits after you plant it as a seedling. The Gold Nugget Mandarin, you can find that in most of your nurseries nowadays. And the Owari Satsuma is also available. A lot of times rootstock is an issue depending on what type of soil you have, and usually you don't get a lot of selection with rootstock when you're buying it in a nursery. So I've kind of messed around a little bit with that, grafting different Satsuma variety, a Satsuma variety onto a different rootstock, because I have very alkaline soil where I'm at.
Yeah, we've got a lot of alkaline soil where we're at too, so that obviously runs a bit of an issue. We got a ton of clay where we're at as well. How about for you, where you're at? Is it a lot of clay or is it more sandy out there?
It's more of a sandy loam here, but it is very alkaline, and there's some salt issues in the water. But generally, the nursery stuff that you get is coming out of California, where they love Carrizo rootstock, and that has not seemed to do very well with alkaline soil. So I think it will work if you really coddle it in the first couple of years, but it's not as tough as like a sour orange rootstock. That's what I've grafted onto, and that seems to work quite a bit better in the alkaline soil. So I know that one of the issues with sour orange rootstock, there is an issue, I believe, in states like California and Florida. I don't think that's allowed because of the Tristeza virus concerns.
Right.
So that's why they don't put it on sour orange rootstocks.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of disease going around, I guess, and so there's a lot of quarantining going on. I know here in the state of Arizona, it's tough to get any plants in, especially citrus, from anywhere else. And so it's been pretty tough, but it has a lot to do with a lot of the disease that's kind of rampant out there. So they just put a lockdown on almost everything. So, but it's nice to hear that seeds are getting through.
Yeah, there are people there are legal methods of getting things. Actually, I was I'm recently working with the germplasm resource over in California. They have I believe it's in Riverside, they have a screen house with 800 or 1,000 different varieties of citrus. And it's actually a federally funded program, and you can order budwood. They provide it, I think, once a year, and they're all clean varieties, no diseases or anything, and they'll actually mail it to you for free because it is a federally funded program, and they want to encourage scientific agriculture stuff. So
well, that's good. And I guess you're in the middle of all that, I guess, in a sense, by all the things that you're connected with here, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying a whole bunch of different things that ultimately I would like to have a commercial small orchard for kind of a retirement type of thing, but I'm still in the experimental phase. It may or may not work in my zone, but I think if it did work in my zone, I would have a very good product because Satsumas, I think, would ripen really nicely in my climate and would be very good and look really good with good coloring.
Well, that's a whole breed of citrus I hadn't even considered or even looked at because I guess we can still pull off a lot of the other varieties here pretty good. And so that's neat. I mean, the whole Satsuma family. I'm just speaking to that one.
Yeah, and Satsumas, evidently, they don't do well in the low deserts like in Phoenix or the Imperial Valley in California. I don't believe they do well in those climates, but a little bit higher into the zone 8 and 9, I think they would do pretty well in areas like Las Vegas or where I'm at.
So why do you suppose that is?
They're just a more cold hardy variety. Or do you mean why don't they work well in the low desert?
Yeah, does it just get too hot? Is it the summertime that causes the challenge with them here as opposed to the cold?
I don't know. I've read about that, but I haven't personally experienced it. I've never tried to plant a Satsuma down in Phoenix, but there is a citrus nursery down there that does sell what they call a Satsuma, and it seems to grow well, but honestly, I don't believe it's a Satsuma. I believe it's a Cara Mandarin, and it seems to be pretty cold hardy as well. It's actually a Satsuma cross with another type of Mandarin, but it's a pretty seedy piece of fruit, but I believe that grows well in the desert, and it grows well in my climate. So I have one of those as well. I think it's a Cara Mandarin.
Well, I definitely know that seedless sells a lot better in the markets, but the seedy typically have better juice, as from my experience, easier to juice when they're seedy. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, especially with like the Valencia oranges and things like that.
Yeah.
So I am looking forward to the Chainsaw Mandarin producing well for me. It's going to be pretty seedy, but it's going to have some really good juice. That's what I've heard. So.
Well, that's a lot of fun. I know the Gold Nugget. That's one that we've been able to grow the Gold Nugget here, but I don't know if it's a true Gold Nugget. Notice that there's some mislabeling that often happens in the citrus world because they do look pretty much the same. And so I'm curious if I just have rootstock growing because doesn't sound like mine ripens in January to usually January, February is when December, January is when my quote Gold Nugget Mandarin actually has been ripening. But it sounds like it's totally off from what you're telling me.
Well, different. So where are you at again?
I'm in the Phoenix area, so in Gilbert.
Okay. Yeah, different fruits will ripen at different times in different climates. Mm-hmm. And in the Phoenix area, the deserts where you do get those cooler nighttime temperatures because of the radiation effect of the heat leaving, it gets cooler than it does in some of the areas in California where the Gold Nugget is more of a commercial thing. And so your Gold Nugget would be ripening sometime in, I would guess, January or February. That would be my guess. But if it's a rootstock, you definitely wouldn't be able to eat it because the typical rootstock varieties right now are trifoliate orange.
Yeah.
You probably have.
Oh yeah, I know
those are pretty readily distinguishable. So I wouldn't think you would have a rootstock. If you can eat it, it's not going to be a rootstock.
Yeah, those trifoliates, it's a crazy looking fruit if you get it to fruit for you, but it's certainly ain't edible.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about the area that I'm in, is that you can drive down the road and occasionally you see a citrus tree growing in somebody's yard. Then you go up closer and you look at it and they say, "Oh yeah, this is they think." One guy told me, "Oh, this is my Meyer lemon. Have you ever tasted the Meyer lemon?" And I looked at it and I said, "No, that is a trifoliate, and your Meyer lemon died years ago. And the rootstock is what is growing now." So there's a lot of people with rootstock trifoliate oranges in their yards because they planted the tree the first year, excuse me, and the top died and the rootstock grew, and they think they don't know exactly what they've got, but there's a lot of trifoliate orange.
That's very true, and that's
around here.
That's probably number one thing I find with people. One of the biggest mistakes they have is that they let the rootstock overtake the graft, and they just don't know any better, and so they end up with a fruit that obviously isn't what they were expecting. And
yeah, a lot of times you'll see that people will. It can only be just a month, and you can have sprouts that are taller than the rest of the tree because they'll just really take off.
Absolutely, and they have such a heart for plants and for plants growing. They don't have the heart to cut that stuff off because they're afraid that they're going to kill the plant. When in reality, the plant that they wanted was probably already dead.
Yeah, best to nip it in the bud, but if you don't get to it, get it as soon as you recognize it, for sure.
Exactly.
Another issue that I'd like to talk a little bit about is the microclimate when you're trying to grow citrus in zone 8 or zone 9. And I've had some success with different areas. It seems like the best thing to do is to grow something in an area that's like between a wall and the house, where it's pretty protected like that, or up against the south-facing wall of a house. That works pretty well. One thing that I think a lot of people don't recognize is what's underneath the tree is going to make a difference also. If you're growing a tree on grass or you've got a lot of mulch there, that's not good. You want to have bare ground or rocks that can essentially absorb the sunlight and heat during the day and then release that at night. That makes a big difference. If you're growing something in zone 8, definitely keep everything clear so the dirt underneath it can absorb as much heat as it can and release that at night. Also, you want to water well before freeze events to make sure the tree is healthy, and also the water acts as kind of a heat sink as well and can help release heat during the cold part of the night.
Yeah, and for those of you out there that are familiar with our microclimate tech and the mapping system that we do, a B or a C microclimate is the ones that we typically do the citrus in, especially be able to keep that radiant heat off of the walls, just like David was talking about. It's that getting that radiation back to the plant, especially. That's what we do with most of our tropicals. It basically, a citrus is a tropical or subtropical type plant. It's going to stay evergreen if you keep it protected from the cold. And it likes to be warm. It likes the warm feet, especially in the through the winter time, in order to produce the fruit that we all love. So that's it's perfect, because microclimates make a huge difference. You can get almost a 20 or 30 degree swing in temperatures just from one side of the house to the other, right?
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I planted one in my lawn and died the first year.
Yep.
Just didn't have the heat that it needed. Another big trick, one of the big things that they do in the commercial orchards, or at least they used to do, is called soil banking. And usually you do that for the first few years after you plant a citrus tree in zone 8 or zone 9. And what you do is you throw, probably right before Thanksgiving, November 15th or somewhere in there, before you get a hard freeze, you throw soil up kind of in a teepee around the tree, kind of as high as you can get it, 18 inches or 2 feet up into the little canopy of the little tree.
Wow.
And that acts as a really, really good insulation for the tree. And then about the beginning of March, you take that off, making sure not to scratch up the wood on the trunk because it can become pretty vulnerable. But that works really well. And I've had trees where I did that and we had a hard winter and killed the whole top of the tree, but then unburied the TP, and then it sprouted from there and is doing well now. So that can make a big difference.
Well, that could definitely make a big difference. And I think if they're doing that, you definitely don't want to be putting too much biomass up inside of that space. It's just soil, right? I mean, it's not going to cause rot or anything like that. You're really just using it as an insulative blanket.
Right, just soil. Yeah, you don't want to throw mulch or anything like that on it, because that could cause some rotting issues. The other method is draping sheets over the top of your citrus on a cold night. A lot of people are probably familiar with that, but you want to do that when it's going to drop down. And one thing that I've seen some people do is leaving the sheets on during the day, and that's not good because it heats up the tree, and then it starts to think, oh, well, it's time to grow, when you just want it to relax and be dormant throughout the cold months.
Yeah, just get them to relax. Don't get them to wake up. We don't want any sap in those leaves and stuff that make it even more susceptible to freeze, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's cool. So where's citrus going? What do you think? What's the future of citrus in where you're at, I guess, and then just kind of in general? Where's it all going? Where do we want it to go?
Well, I guess the big thing in citrus right now is the citrus greening that everybody's scared of. It looks like Florida's having some real problems, but I think that they're working on genetically modified things to try to maybe someday have a good genetically modified variety that they can use for the orange juice. I don't know if everybody's going to like that, but that might end up being the only option because Florida's really got that disease bad.
So maybe you can talk just a little bit about the greening. For those that don't know about it, maybe we can just kind of revisit what is the citrus greening, what's happening around that, and why is it a big issue? Why is it increasing the price of their orange juice?
Yeah, it's a disease that got into Florida, I don't know, 10 or 15 years back. There's no cure for it. There's things they can do to mitigate the effects of it, but there's no cure for it, and it will end up killing the tree. And if you're over there in the southeast, I've been over there and seen fruit in the market in the stores, and you look at it and it looks kind of green and ugly. That's from that citrus greening disease. It makes the fruit look ugly, and then ultimately it will kill the tree.
And I'm pulling up some pictures of it right now on the site here so that people can see what it looks like. Because I know, here we go. Yep, it's weird. It's like half ripe.
Yeah,
fruit.
and so that's why you got all the quarantines, and it's difficult to buy different varieties and things like that. It's because nobody wants that in their citrus growing region. I don't think it's become much of an issue for California yet, and less of an issue for Arizona, but everybody's scared it's going to get here. It's transferred by the Asian citrus facility. I think it's like a little bug that eats on the citrus trees and passes the disease along. So that's why we've got all these quarantines.
Yeah, it's like a citrus aphid, basically, is what the little guy looks like. It's a funny little bug. I've got some pictures of those I pulled up too so that people can see that. And so it's not a big concern for us in Arizona at this point. I think a lot of it has to do with the humidity, the ambient humidity they have in Florida, where that bug likes to hang around a bit more. And that's why it's not as big of a concern for Arizona, but it's certainly nothing that we'd like to bring in. And so for a lot of us, that ambient dryness that we've got should protect us against a lot of that.
I'm hoping that's the case. I think that's kind of what happened with the Tristeza virus. It never really became much of an issue in Arizona because the bugs don't like the dry heat that we've got. But it might end up being an issue, but I hope not.
Right. So how do we protect our plants against any disease? Is there kind of a fail-safe that you found for your trees just to make sure that things are healthy and protected against a lot of those diseases?
Well, I try not, follow the quarantines. Don't go get a plant from Florida and transport it over here to Arizona or to Texas or anything. That's a good way to to make sure not to do that. If you're going to be grafting, get your budwood from a good source, like that source that I mentioned earlier. You don't want to, have your cousin in Florida ship you something. That wouldn't be a good idea. Take good care of your trees. When they get injuries, that's when disease is susceptible to get into them. So be careful about that.
And so how do you protect, if you get an injury on a tree, especially your citrus tree, what can you do for that bark? Because there's not much of a bark layer on those guys. What can you do for them so that they can repair from a damage or even a cut?
Well, typically with citrus, people say don't prune citrus, but if you've got diseased or damaged wood, that's the first thing you want to prune out of it. I actually had a hailstorm over here a year and a half ago, and that really set me back. And I learned that branch that's got all those hail marks on it, just cut it off, because it's going to be easier to heal from that than all the other damage. So prune out your diseased or dead wood. Paint your trunks so they don't get sun damage.
Now, what we've done a lot of the time, we try to just keep them very bush-like, more like they I guess naturally grow, so we can then protect the trunk by simply having green growing at the base of it. So rather than making the canopy side, we kind of go more of a bush. Is that helpful? Have you found that useful as well?
Yeah, and actually I've seen that can also be helpful for the cold hardy issue as well. Mm-hmm. I know someone here in my community that has a grapefruit tree that's working, and it's essentially sprawled out over gravel or rock. And so the rock kind of radiates the heat up into it. So the foliage protects the trunk, and the rock being really close like that gives it a little bit more heat. So
it's all about warmth with those citrus. It's all about warmth. Yep. And so around this time of year, I mean, we are in kind of February for ourselves right now, going into March, and things are starting to bloom. Any suggestions on how to support your citrus trees as they bloom?
Now's the time to fertilize them and keep them watered well.
That's a good point. And when you're fertilizing them, what do you like to fertilize with?
I just use a well-rounded fertilizer. Just what the store has that says it's well-rounded. Good. Yeah, I guess I'm not real educated in that way, but what I use seems to work.
A good balanced fertilizer with the NPKs and just feeding it is obviously the important part. If you don't feed it, it's just like all of us. We don't do so well if we're not fed. We get a little cranky.
Right.
So hopefully your trees won't be so cranky, and they'll provide some nice fruit for you. They'll smile at you with their face full of blooms and fruit later on.
Yep, that's right. So I'd say ultimately one of the main challenges for growing citrus in Zone 8 is finding the right varieties. That can be pretty darn difficult. I think the only thing that you're going to find out there in the nurseries would be the Owari Satsuma, and that should work for you. But the other varieties are difficult to find unless you want to do your own grafting, grow your own rootstocks, that kind of thing.
Well, and that can be fun for some, but not for everybody, right?
Right. It's challenging. It's not easy to learn, but there are a bunch of YouTubes out there, so it can be a fun hobby.
Fun little exploration to see what you can get. And I know there's a lot of charts out there too on maturity periods for different harvest, the harvest times for different types and varieties. It's good to find those charts that fit where you live. I know at Agriscaping we've got, if you guys are if you out there are part of the garden planning software, we've got actually a year-round fruit calendar for pretty much everywhere in the country. And we do get into some detail on the citrus, especially for those in the Arizona climate zones, on when they typically ripen for certain varieties. I know in the desert Southwest, it's relatively the same, but just like we find within every climate, there's microclimates and subclimates. I mean, from Scottsdale to Phoenix to Gilbert, though we're all within the same, they call it the same climate zone, we got some major differences in terms of when things actually ripen. But it is good to at least get a calendar for yourself on the different varieties that grow for you. For all you out there, if you haven't got one already, check it out at agriscaping.com. We've also got a fun edible flower guide that'll kind of lead you into some of those other things if you just want to learn how to grow new things. And David, it's been great having you on the podcast today. Any final thoughts about citrus that you'd like to share with everybody?
No, it's been good to be with you, and there's a lot of information out there on cold hardy citrus on the internet. But yeah, just keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying. Find the ones you like the most. I mean, go to a taste testing. That's another good thing to do. Make sure you're doing a taste testing in your local area, hopefully from local growers, because that'll be more realistic on what you can grow for yourself. Now, if you're growing indoors, we usually recommend just sticking with the kumquats varieties that you can keep small, and they can handle a little more shade, which is what the indoor environments typically have. And I'm curious about some of those mandarins, the Satsuma varieties, if we might be able to dwarf some of those. Or have you seen any of that going on out there that people could grow indoors?
I haven't. I've heard that you can grow Satsumas indoors, and that's another method that a lot of people use. They get a big pot and they put it out in the summertime and bring it in wintertime. Yeah, and that can work.
It's like, I know I've got some calamansi in my family room right now. We just have it growing up the wall, literally. And it handles the shade, and it's got a bunch of fruit on it right now. It's happy as a clam, and it's funny little shaded spot in my family room.
Nice. Yeah, with the Satsumas, there's a guy over in South Carolina that does a lot of growing of Satsumas. He's also in Zone 8. I think his name's Stan McKenzie, but I've talked to him before, and evidently he really got hit hard with that cyclone bomb thing that happened a month or two ago over in
the bomb cyclone.
Yeah, it really did a number on his orchard. He's got an orchard out there, but he's got a lot of good information about different varieties that are cold hardy. He has a website, but to get there's a whole bunch of different Satsuma varieties, and you can get a lot of those from the germplasm thing over in California. Robert Kruger is the guy in charge of that, and he's really helpful also.
So how do we find that online, the germplasm?
Oh, I would have to look it up.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Germplasm, I think it's in Riverside. Yeah, their website isn't exactly friendly or anything.
Yeah.
The National Clonal Germplasm Repository for Citrus, and Robert Kruger is the contact that you would need to talk to. But yeah, their website's not exactly friendly, but they are a nationally or federally funded program that can help you out with budwood and the seeds for some rootstocks.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and I've got that pulled up here. So yeah, certainly not your modern website, but certainly one that's likely useful for those who know how to use it.
Yeah, my best suggestion is find Robert Kruger's email and see if you can get some budwood from him.
All right, Robert Kruger. We'll make sure we note on that. I guess it's all part of the repository. It also has looks like dates and stuff in that group too. So that's good.
Right.
Yeah, is that one you've tried dates?
No, I have not tried dates.
All right.
They're good, but not good enough to put that much energy into.
Or that much time. They definitely can take a lot of time. They're not the easiest things. There's a lot more work you got to do on the dates to make sure you get a good ratio of seed or pit to meat. But anyway, right. We've had some fun with those. Well, again, David, it's been great having you on. Check out some of these things. We'll be posting these along with this post. There should be some links down there so you can find it easy to get to the things that he talked about on the class today or on the show. And we'll look forward to another podcast again. Again, thanks again, David. We'll look forward to seeing what you create here now and in the future.
All right. Thank you. Good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you too.
Thank you. Bye.